Hello, and welcome to Unfudge Your Marketing. This is a show where I chat with business owners about their marketing, mistakes, mishaps, and things that didn't go quite as planned. But most importantly, we share the lessons learned for all of you, our listeners. I am your host. I'm Kristi Mitchell. I am a marketing strategist, and I work with service-based business owners who have relied on referrals and word of mouth to build their business. And they know in order to take their business to that next level, they need to finally think more strategically about their marketing. Today, I am super excited to welcome Sussle Bonanni to the show. Lori founded Elsis, a multidisciplined communications consultancy to help clients uncover unique stories that engage desired audiences and garner awareness, business results, and credibility. She believes communication is the perfect blend of creativity, innovation, and strategy. Through storytelling, Lori turns powerful messages into compelling narratives that resonate with the intended audience. Lori delivers thought-provoking talks and workshops, combining authentic stories, compelling research, and actionable takeaways. Her most popular topics include cracking the PR code, unearthing a compelling hook, mindful communication, who are you unknowingly excluding? Lori works primarily in tech and healthcare. In tech, she partners with clients in B2B, SaaS, and verticals applying tech to solve industry-specific challenges. In healthcare, she partners with clients spanning women's health, medical devices, and pharma. Her writing and insights have been featured in Forbes, NASDAQ, Crunchbase, and more. Before founding Elsis, Lori held marketing, communication, and business development roles at Verizon, NBC Universal, DDB, and Ogilvy Health. With that, I will welcome Lori to the show.
Thank you, Kristi. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for being here. So I always like to share with our listeners how I know my guests. So Lori and I go way back. I think I met her my very first year in business. We met through a local networking group and have become great friends. Sometimes we get our kids together. And yeah, it's just been so great to have you in my world for the past few years.
I have to agree.
I am really excited for this chat today. So we're doing things a little bit different today. Normally I talk with business owners about a specific marketing mistake, mishap experience that they have had personally. But the idea for this conversation actually started through some text messages that Lori and I were exchanging recently about wording in marketing that kind of drives us crazy. Like it makes us cringe and is like, oh dear God, please don't do that for your marketing. And so I was like, you know what? I think we should talk about this on Unfudge Your Marketing. So I appreciate your willingness to come on the show and have this chat with me today.
You're welcome. And yeah, I think we have similar pet peeves. So
I know. I told Lori, depending on how this episode goes, this might have to be like a regular thing. Like every month or every couple months, I'll just have a marketing friend on and we will talk about the things that drive us crazy in marketing that we see out there, things that you should not be doing as a business owner. So Lori, I know there's like a bunch of different things that we could talk about in this episode, but the very first thing was the topic that we were texting back and forth about with regard to wording that we see in marketing that we don't like. I think it kind of almost fall into a few buckets. Like, and I was actually reviewing one of my clients' pieces of content just this week, and she had some like cliche things in there. I think she might have had AI help her write it. And I was like, okay, I wouldn't use this. I wouldn't use this. Like, I'd change that, like be more specific. So I think there's like cliches that we see all the time. And I also think that it's really common lately to see this almost like fake sense of urgency or scarcity in trying to entice somebody to purchase or to sign up for something. So I'll stop talking. Let me kick it over to you. What are you seeing? What drives you crazy?
Cliches. I mean, I think we want to write like we write and we want to talk like we talk, but really our writing should sound like we talk. Otherwise, it's like, well, what do you do? And, one of the things, and because I work in tech, one of the things when I work with a new client, I say, well, what do you do? And then I get maybe 3 different answers from 3 different people in the company. And then I ask, well, what is your grandma think? Like, what would you tell your grandma that you do? And then I get like a very clear and concise answer, right? Because that's what people want to know, right? Like I work with journalists. So journalists don't have time to go through like gobbledygook, like get to the point. Like, what do you want to say? So the cliche piece is really annoying because you want to be I'm a word nerd. So like let's caveat this entire conversation. Like I am a total word nerd, and be deliberate in your words. Are filler words helping you? Are you using like SAT words that you wouldn't normally say in a conversation? One of the biggest things when you write is to read it out loud. Does it sound like something that would come out of your voice? And so also being concise, like if you said something like, just make sure to leave out unnecessary filler words, that's a bunch of words. All you could say is like remove unnecessary words. So like you don't need these really long convoluted phrases. And so yes, I think the cliche piece going into that really comes into not being so clear and concise, because plain language really does stand out the most. And you don't need a dictionary to decipher unfamiliar technology when you're reading marketing materials.
Yes. So there's like a few things I want to pull out from this conversation, right? Because this show is all about like giving those lessons learned to our listeners. So for those business owners, maybe marketing leaders listening to this show, things like not using cliches, getting right to the point, right? Like remove unnecessary filler words, which I will totally raise my hand and say I'm very guilty of that. But I'm mindful of it. So I just sent out my email newsletter today. And as I was like, I always write it and then I like to come back to it like a day or two later. I'm like, okay, wait a minute. Why did I word it this way? Like, let me take out these extra words. So be concise, remove the filler words. I'm still a work in progress on that one. And the other piece that I really like what you said is writing like you would speak, because I think you're right. I think oftentimes we have this difference of like, this is how I talk, but like, this is how I would write something.
Yeah.
And they really shouldn't be so different. And I think it gets to a piece that, now I'm going to use the word, and I just saw someone say that they hate this word being used on LinkedIn, but authenticity. So I think it might be becoming a cliche, but I do think that there is anyone who follows me and the way that I approach marketing knows I am huge on authenticity. And so I think it gets back to that as well, like making sure that anything you're putting out there that represents your company authentically conveys your brand. And if you're trying to write in this like corporate speak that people aren't going to understand, I think that's not doing you any justice.
Yeah. What's that phrase? WYSIWYG or something? Like what you see is what you get, like for like website design. I feel like that's us, right? Like in terms of like what you see is what you get. Like this is authenticity. And, in full disclosure, Kristi knew before we went on live, I was like, I'm kind of freaked out by this. So, I think that, what you see is what you get is really, what does that marketing material look like? People, they want to, I think COVID changed a lot of things, and, pulling down the barrier was one of those, and for the better, right?
Yes. Yeah. And I think this kind of ties into something else I teed up, which might be part of our discussion today, is this almost like false sense of urgency or scarcity. And when I see it, again, actually, this just came up with one of my clients when I was proofreading some content. It was like an offer that she's working to promote, and there was like this note in there about like, well, it's ending, like basically, right? Like, well, buy it now before it's gone. It's like, okay, but is it really leaving? Like, are you only offering this thing for a certain amount of time, or are you just trying to get someone to buy it? But really, it's still going to be on your website and people can still purchase it later. So I think it kind of ties into this conversation about what you see is what you get. Like, can we just be honest? Do we have to create this false sense of urgency to entice somebody to buy? Now, I understand there are sales tactics and approaches that lend themselves to using those kinds of words, but I think you have to walk a fine line in terms of getting people to buy, but not going so far so that it's like, it seems disingenuous or inauthentic.
Well, and it's almost the boy that calls wolf. If everything is like, this is the final time, like, what is it? Because if it's the final time and 3 months later you're sharing it again, like, was there a special price for that? Or what does that ultimately look like? Because I think that call to action really matters, what that urgency is. Like, is your offer, I don't know. I don't know what the client was doing, but like, is the offer like, I'm only going to offer at this price because it's a beta test and I'm not going to offer it elsewhere at this price? Or is the offer truly going away? Like,
Yes.
my daughter is selling Girl Scout cookies, and on one of the forums, it's like, I don't blanking on the name of the cookie, but it's like, toasty yay, it's the final goodbye. Like, great. Like, if they had done that for the last 3 years, it would have been really annoying, but it's very much like, the girls were told, like, push those because that's the last year. So something along the lines of that feels more authentic than.
Yes. Yes. I totally agree with that.
Great job, Girl Scouts.
Yes. Great job, Girl Scouts. I love that. Wait, now you do need to let me know which cookie that is, though, because if it's one that I like, I'm going to need to buy a bunch.
Okay, I will.
So yeah, and I was like, there was something else I was going to say on this point. So that is one thing. So I run a membership program, the marketing support group for business owners and marketing leaders who are doing their own marketing. They don't have the benefit of being part of a marketing team. And so that is one thing. And I learned this from a membership strategist because she's smarter than I am on membership. It's her area of expertise. I said, I really don't want to be in launch mode all the time. I don't want to be, selling this membership all the time. But I do understand that there's benefit to like, okay, the doors are open and they're closing and that whole thing. So what I decided to do for that was I open the doors, the virtual doors, on a quarterly basis. So every quarter I run a workshop that helps business owners plan their marketing for the quarter ahead. And then I have the doors open to register for the membership within like a 2 to 3 week period. And then they close and then I'm not promoting it anymore. And so that's one way. I guess I'm just trying to give that as like an example for people. If they're like, well, I do have an offer that's kind of ongoing, but I, want to have this opportunity to promote it. Maybe that's an option.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. And I think something similar is probably like rolling admissions for colleges, right? Like they're constantly promoting until the doors are closed or committed or, whatever that looks like. But it's just ongoing. Whereas a lot of communities do quarterly. And so you're promoting it throughout, you're doing your other marketing and outreach, but you're not like doors are open, all year.
Pushing the sales. Yeah. Yeah. That's another point too, in terms of like, how can you create, I want to go back to what you said about like the beta pricing, right? Especially if it's something new that we're offering in terms of a service or maybe a product, saying that there's a certain amount available at this price and then the pricing will go up. But I think you have to stay true to that and actually up the price, or, have that, whatever that timeline is, whether it's a certain number or I've seen that before too, right? Like, there's so many seats available for an online course or a group program or a mastermind or something like that. But is that true? And will people know that it's true?
I think a company that does this really well. Do you know what Nugget, like those kid couches? It's
maybe I have heard of it.
Yeah, they're based in North Carolina. I have no connection to them, but they're big.
He is not receiving any promotional discounts for advertising on behalf of
nothing. But they have this Nugget couch, and it never goes on sale because they had people that were really early adopters, and it never went on sale. It doesn't. And then they have recently launched this like ottoman that's like it comes apart. It's quite cool. And so that has a different price point and different fabrics and all of that, but there's no sale. But when they launched those ottomans, they did put a sale price together if you bought both. But
Mhm.
still, they've stayed very true to themselves that they have not discounted. And I think if you were an early adopter and bought early on, and people ask all the time, now, your phones are listening, so you'll get a nugget ad. And if you look, it will, people will ask about sales and they don't. And so I feel like that, and there wasn't like a limited time for, buying both of them together. So I do think that there's value in, authenticity, going back to that, and really being transparent and staying true to your roots about that. So
yeah, and that actually reminds me of something that wasn't on my list of topics we could talk about in this episode, but I did talk about it around the holidays, in that this notion, especially for service-based business owners, to feel like they have to hop on like the holiday discount bandwagon, like, oh, Black Friday and holidays, and let's have a discount, and to me and this is not everybody, right? So if you're a service-based business owner and you're like, yeah, I do a holiday sale, by all means, that's your prerogative. For me personally, I just feel like it devalues what I do. And so I would be less inclined to offer a discount on my services just because it's the holiday time and that's what it feels like everybody in the marketing world is doing. And I'd maybe be more inclined to be doing some client outreach, maybe offer something special just to my past clients or something like that. But that's another area I think that can be really difficult for business owners to navigate when there's like this big world of marketing out there that we're inundated all the time, right? Every area of our life, marketing touches it in some way. We get ads and promos and billboards and commercials and all these things. And so I think it can be challenging for business owners to not just like jump on what everyone else is doing.
Yeah, you have to find out what works for you. And I also think in terms of small business owners, Q4 is usually really busy. And so do we have time? I mean, we should always have time to work in our business, on our business, but is that the right time to do those promotions? And just thinking about the timing of that, what does that actually look like? And just being, even asking for feedback, what is the time of year that you are most likely to buy services to help your business? It's probably not Q4, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that's an interesting one. I do think it depends. I personally, my business picks up in Q4 because I think business owners are like, okay, my workload is slowing down a little bit and now I'm ready to invest in my marketing. So I get really busy in Q4, but I know it just depends.
Yeah, it does depend, but I think that the timing is interesting. One thing we didn't talk about that is a thing for a word nerd like me is just general grammar and proofreading. And with people using AI and different, spell checkers, if something's spelled right, but it doesn't make sense, it might not necessarily get picked up. So there, and there, buy, and buy, two, and two. And I will give your viewers a little trick is reading the copy in reverse, because you are looking at it with totally different eyes and you're paying more attention to the actual words than just, those puzzles that are like the vowels are all missing, but you can still read it.
Yeah.
That's how our brains work. But reading backwards is, and I should clarify because somebody once asked me like the words backwards, and no, each word backwards.
Each word, but read the sentence backwards. Yes. That's really interesting. I feel that sounds like a really good brain workout to me, to like take a sentence and read it.
Yeah. Backwards. And the other, making sure hyperlinks are working and linking to the correct page. If you've got page numbers, make sure that they're not duplicated or omitted, and just really making sure that you're not missing a beat on that. And, this is also taking it with a grain of salt as somebody who used to circle typos and takeout menus. But I think the art of proofreading and editing, people are so easy to, quick to just drop something in that it's really interesting. I've seen a story. I saw a story that there was a professor. If I can pop the link when I find it, but she basically had written, an assignment and write about blah, blah, blah for this course. But in the text, she actually wrote in 1 point font in white, like insert elephant or something like in here. So anyone that popped the prompt into a ChatGPT or something, elephant somehow came in, and she actually got assignments that had elephant mentioned, which obviously was one of the ways that she was using to fix that. But I'll find it and you can pop it in the sources. But really rereading and not just taking anything just
Yes.
and not just, you know, with AI, with any copy.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Okay. There's a few things there. So first thing I will say is I'm so thankful for the boss that I had the longest when I worked in higher ed, because he was like a huge grammar person and like spelling and all of those things. So like that is deeply ingrained in me. And if I miss a typo or something isn't grammatically correct and someone points it out to me, it's like, oh God, he would be so disappointed in me. So I get it. I like the idea of reading things backwards. I think another tip too, just as like a given, right, is like having somebody else read it. Like have other people read it, someone who is trained in that way, having a copywriter on hand. Or I'm curious if you have other thoughts on that, depending on, obviously, there's so many different makeups to businesses, right? We could have business owners who are writing some of their own copy listening to the show. We could have business owners who have a marketing team of one. I think that's very common, right? So like, what do you suggest that they do? Are there online tools that can help, or is it best to like seek outside support to help with that, to catch those mistakes before things get published?
So just on a bigger scale, right? Look at journalism. There's journalists and there's editors, because everyone needs a second set of eyes. If you are a published author, somebody has, you know, read it, fact checked, proofread. And not just proofreading, but like copy editing, line editing. There's all sorts of, you know, sensitivity, you know, reads and stuff. So definitely just double checking all of that, whether it is somebody else. And like a tool like Grammarly is really good. But for me, like, and this is, you know, in my world, very controversial, but I am not a fan of the Oxford comma, and Grammarly loves the Oxford comma. And so for consistency's sake, if I'm in Grammarly, I know whatever I'm popping in, you know, to proofread me is not my final version, because I know they'll change words. You know, it's not, I'm just doing it to make sure I'm, you know, competitive. I like the number, the percentage, you know, but, you know, I know for me, my style of writing, no Oxford comma. And so making sure that that's consistent to something.
Yes.
And so I think always just any tool that you can use or another set of eyes is just, you know, there's so many tools to review spelling, punctuation, grammar. But again, like you don't want to solely use that, because they can bypass the there, and 222.
Yes.
So you just want to make sure that that works for you.
I'm so glad you brought up the Oxford comma, because I had that thought earlier when we were talking about something else. Because the other thing I've seen a couple people post about this on LinkedIn lately is the whole M dash controversy, and how some people are saying that if you see M dashes, it's an automatic giveaway that someone used AI. And in copyright, some copywriters are like coming back and being like, I use M dashes all the time. Don't just assume it's AI. So I love that you bring up that point, is these tools can be helpful. And going back to the beginning of this conversation, we were talking about authenticity. You have to make sure that, you know, they might catch some things, but you also want to make sure you don't lose what's authentic for you, whether you're building your personal brand or your company brand, in using those tools.
Fan of the M dash here, but when that was going around, I was like I would be writing and I'd be like, do I keep that in? And it's like, yes, that's grammatically, that's where it belongs, you know?
You're like, but I don't want someone to think the AI wrote this.
But I do think that, you know, yeah, making it sound like you. Like I have certain preferences in my writing and, you know, things like that. So
yes.
I think that figure out what that looks like. Like when you do like a brand assessment, like, do you have a certain point font? I mean, and this is not my expertise, but like, do you have a certain point font? What are your grammar styles? And then if you are hiring somebody to do your marketing, when they write and you write, it will be aligned, because you have, you know, these grammar preferences that you use.
I love that because I think a lot of times when we think of branding in the marketing world, we think of colors and logos and fonts and like having those standards, which is really important. And I think there is this whole other side of it that maybe we don't always consider, which is the tone and the style of the copy that's going out on behalf of the company. So I think that that's a really great point.
Yeah. Like I know my preferences, and I know if I sent you a document yesterday. And so in there, I know that it's single. It is, Cambria. It is 10.5. Like that is, if I'm writing a document, that's what I will send it
Yeah.
as. And that is part of
no Oxford commas.
No Oxford commas.
Yeah, I don't like them either.
But I'm a writer and I write for clients. And that is, I have a questionnaire that I send out to clients when we get started. And one of my questions, in jest, but for real is Oxford comma, yay or nay. And that is, something to really take into account because as I'm writing for clients and on behalf of them or ghostwriting for them, I need to get their tone and figuring out, okay, we're going to put, a line in the ground. Where do you stand on that? And then, as we get to know each other and I, read some of their stuff, I can get an idea of their tone. But it's those. I
love that you do that. That's so smart. So smart. The other thing I just want to touch on quickly too is, we've talked about AI a little bit, but that is one thing. So I have an AI tool that I love and I talk about it all the time because I can upload my video and audio content and then I can have it write blogs and LinkedIn posts and all of those things. And I always use it as a starting point. It's really good. Like I don't have to do a lot of editing because it's already using the way that I'm talking and speaking. So it's really good, but there are certain things, right? Like first of all, I think everyone knows at this point, AI likes to insert a lot of emojis. So like sometimes too much, like let's delete out some of those. And it loves certain words like delve. Delve is a word that like AI loves. And like, I will never say that word. And if it is in any of my marketing copy, it was totally an oversight because that's just not something I use.
Oh my gosh, I can go out. Revolutionary is one of the words I can't stand. As somebody that writes press releases and reaches out to media to get those press releases as stories, and I am thrilled to announce. I am excited to announce. Like, great, that's why we're announcing it. Like, let's just get rid of that.
Just assumed.
Yeah, but I think there's, also, just going into different kinds of words and language, killing two birds with one stone. Like you don't need to say that, or, I'm going to take a shot in the dark. Like there's like a lot of violent language out there and just softening it. And, let's not beat a dead horse. You could say like, let's not focus on that anymore. I'll send you the link to put in the notes. It's this woman, Anna Taylor. She's got this whole evolving from violent language and it's a fantastic, fantastic resource.
Yes. That is such a great point because it kind of goes back to how we started this conversation talking about like some cliches and things that we need to kind of stop ourselves and rethink, like, is that really what we should be saying? But like on a deeper level, to your point, these things that have this very violent connotation that are just, they can be so natural for us to just like spit it out. And it's like, wait a minute, let's be a little more mindful.
Yeah, no, there's definitely words out there that are just, that's how we started, but like a little bit cringy and, best man for the job or like, let's have a powwow. Like these are not words that really are socially acceptable anymore. And there's better options out there.
Yes. Please do send that resource. Appreciate that. We are coming up on time already. This flew by. So, Lori, I would like to ask you as we wrap up, is there anything that you want to leave our listeners with? The one thing that comes, which I'm jumping in before you, I'm just going to say words matter. Like, I feel like that is my takeaway from this conversation. Like, our words and our marketing materials matter. But what is it that you want to leave our listeners with?
Really just taking a step back and like looking at the bigger picture, right? Like talking about cliches, like making sure that like, what are you communicating? And, making sure that your intended message is actually reaching your intended audience. Who are you speaking to? Because like going back to, are you speaking to your grandma with a lot of, convoluted language, or are you being, really straight and to the point? So I think that that's something is, really keeping in mind. That's one of the big things I always say is, make sure that your intended message reaches your intended audience. And that can be through media, that can be through comms, that can be through your own marketing materials. It doesn't need to be, it's a conversation like this,
Yeah. I love that. Make sure that your intended message reaches your intended audience. There's so much power, I think, in that simple statement.
And that's what I do.
Love it. Love it. Lori, thank you so much for being willing to come on. And if our listeners want to learn more about you and what you're doing at Elsis, how can they get in touch with you?
Sure. So you find me right here on LinkedIn, Lori Sussle Bonanni. You can also visit my website, which is elsus.com. So ELSSUS.com, which is actually Sussle backwards. So talk about thinking differently and reading backwards. And speaking about all of this communication, I have a free download on my site called Amplify Your Impact. So you would just go to elsus.com/amplify your impact, and it's right there. It might pop up, might not, but we'll put it in the link as well. But that would be the best way. And I also host monthly Ask Me Anythings, which is the next one is actually on Friday, and we can pop that link in as well.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Lori. I appreciate it. Thank you to all of our listeners tuning in, and